Enjoy a seat at the table for great conversation and good company.
Welcome to And Good Company. I'm Sarah Fiedelholtz. We all know a great dinner party isn't really about the food. It's about the people seated around the table engaging in lively discussions. And Good Company gives you a seat at the table to enjoy smart and interesting conversations as they happen. I am very pleased to be in the company of Cathy Roudebush, a board brilliant and president of the Quest Club. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So first, before we get into your role as the president of Quest Club, tell me a little bit about your background and about Board Brilliant and what you do.
Okay, well, I'm not a native from Fort Wayne. I am from Central Indiana and actually came to Fort Wayne fresh out of law school more years ago than I'd like to admit. Practiced law here for about 33 years. And then during that time served on a number of community nonprofit boards. And often as the lawyer on the committee or on the board, you end up chairing the governance committee, board development, those sorts of things. And so crafted the company Board Brilliant and got a board source certification as a governance trainer to address those needs in the nonprofit community in a meaningful way for them. So that's what I'm doing now.
So you sort of work as a consultant with boards or for nonprofits to create their boards, or the role of a board? Or?
The role of the board, good governance for boards, strategic planning for boards. Obviously, I've spent a number of years doing nonprofit legal work, so bylaws, governance documents, anything like that a board needs would be something that Board Brilliant we would work with them on. So.
And I mean, don't you think that any nonprofit is only as good as its board? I mean,
yes, and I would add to that the board is foundationally can be a much better board for its organization with the right skill set, because we have, if you think about it, a board is an ever-changing group of people who come in with different levels of acumen, either in their board service or even life experiences. And so Board Brilliant's focus is really to try and get that level set so that everyone understands their role in the organization, understands what others' roles are in the organization, whether that's management, whether that's constituencies in the community, any of those things, and then use that as a stepping off point then for the board to really be fabulous, and really there's a governance continuum, being a board that governs with excellence. That's really the goal.
And so obviously with your background and your legal mind, it would make sense that you were sort of drawn to Quest Club.
Yes.
So the Quest Club is 100. It's entering its 111th.
Yes, we're in what we're calling our 110th year, although we straddle calendar years.
Okay. So first, why don't you explain a little bit about what Quest Club is, and then we can dive into that.
Sure. Quest Club actually, when it was initiated 110 years ago, was founded as a group for businessmen in the businessmen in the Fort Wayne area to gather and exchange ideas. And so they came up with the concept of meeting over lunch and having someone present a paper. And in those days, there were so many things happening, the turn of the last century, that they would present papers on, innovations. They would present papers on good governance of businesses and things like that. And so that was the Quest Club at the outset. And it was, a veritable list, who's who of businessmen in the Fort Wayne community. Over the years, it sort of slowly morphed into what it is today, and I would say by maybe the 70s or 80s, it took the shape really of what it is now, which is a group of community people who
still
have
a lot of the who's who of Fort Wayne.
Right,
I would say.
it's still, that's probably true, but not focused on business at all, and not just businessmen, but women, and in fact, we have probably about 35 to 40% of our members are women. And obviously the president is a woman this year, and I think I am the 7th woman to chair the Quest Club, and next year's president also is a woman.
Which is interesting, considering that women were not allowed to become members until 1992.
Correct. Yeah.
So you think about it, that
right. It was, and I think it was when it did occur, and I was not in Quest Club in 1992, but I think it was something that was uniformly supported at that point in time. It's sort of was a, why have we not done this yet? And so since that time, women have been, in the last 30 years, 7 presidents have been women. So it's fairly proportionate to our percentage of membership in the club. But we now have a broad base of topics. There's a committee actually that selects topics. When you present your paper, you don't pick your topic. The committee assigns a topic to you. So, which is kind of interesting. You spend a year learning about something you may or may not know a lot about.
And then the idea is that you're going to present a paper that in some ways is a little bit more scholarly in nature. I mean, you do give a bibliography, and
correct.
So it is a more academic
It
approach.
is. Yes, you do. It's an interesting blend. You're given a topic. It's broad enough that you have the ability to take it in a path that you would like to do so. We try to keep the topics broad enough that there is an opportunity for the paper presenter to have some individuality overlay that topic. And we have, just in the last few years, have become receptive to technology. So if someone wants to present a video or a PowerPoint or something like that, that you can incorporate that in the presentation. It still has to be a paper format. The papers are archived actually here at the Allen County Public Library and online. And they are prepared. Formerly they were read on the Northeast Indiana radio reading. I don't think that's still done anymore, but so we did have that opportunity for folks in the community for a while, but they are accessible online if anyone wants to read them.
But really, so I mean, in the course of over the last 111 years, I mean, there's been over 2,000 papers, but really though, I mean, in some ways, the presentation or the information that's gleaned from the topic is sort of limited to the members in a sense, because the presentation is given to other members of the group, right? So do you think that sort of limits the community engagement? Because I mean, a lot of people, they're at the library, but even trying to find them is rather difficult. I mean, it's not, you can't search, they're not searchable on because I tried to do that.
There's a Quest Club website that is operated by the library where anyone has access to that. One of the things that we're working on in the next 2 to 3 years, we just started this planning last year, is to revamp the website so that it would be a little more user-friendly, even for our members. Because one of the things that we often do to say to a new member to Quest Club is, here, go to the website, you can pull up some archived papers, really see what they're about, what they look like, even if you've attended one, as I know you have, and listened to a paper be presented, to actually see it on paper or virtually gives you a better idea, I think, of what is being done in the club.
And you have about 150 active members, is that?
140.
Okay, so if you really think about this, sort of, it's almost like a salon in a sense, where and to have intellectual conversation and based on discovery and curiosity but I mean, if you think about 150 people versus a community of, let's just say 250,000 people, that's not really getting more people involved in this type of conversations. And I'm curious to think if you think that's I personally think it's because the majority of people aren't interested in having these kinds of conversations, and not necessarily.
I think it's an interesting point, Sarah, because I think there are probably a multitude of answers to that question. I think, first of all, this Quest is not for everyone. And I will tell you that, we are a member organization, and so, people will come at the request of a member as a guest and say, this is very interesting to attend, but one of the components of membership is every 3 or 4 years, you're writing a paper and you're giving a presentation and you read it. So you certainly don't have to be a public speaker of sorts or a performer in any way. You can literally read your paper to the group.
But if you want more engagement and you want more interest,
you can do that. You certainly there's a latitude there that you can.
And it's not just that you're reading. That you have a 30-minute to read. You read the paper. It's a 30-minute paper, but then you have Q&A.
Correct.
So that's the engagement with
at the end of every paper, you're correct. There is an opportunity for questions from those who are present, the members and guests. Guests are always encouraged, in fact, to ask questions as part of the Q&A session thereafter. So yes, so it is an opportunity where it's not just a standard presentation and we're done. There is an interactive component to it each week, which for some people can either be engaging or nerve-wracking and maybe even a barrier to joining. But so that's the structure of Quest, and that I think has remained fairly static. That we do want to have that engagement at the end of every paper, so that there's a chance for the folks who have listened to it to actually comment and question.
But when you look at, it's just such a dichotomy to where we see ourselves today in such a polarized society, and not being able to engage in conversation and also I sort of think gaining knowledge for the sake of knowledge and enjoying that process. And to me, part of this is the breakdown of our whole belief in liberal arts education. And so I'm curious, especially, and I think that, with a legal mind, you sort of have to have that broad knowledge base and pull from lots of different sources. And so what I'm curious about is if you think, and over the time that you've been in Quest, and obviously, also we have to take into account the average age of a member of Quest. So, do you think that this kind of salon and a club will continue?
I think it will. Will it look exactly like it does right now? No, but that's not a bad thing. I think being adaptive is good in any environment. I will say, I think if you come to any one Quest, you'll find a wide range of folks age-wise, and I think that's good. We have people in their 30s and we have people in their 80s. And to be honest with you, that's yet another positive thing about it, because while we also have a polarized society, we also have one that's rather segmented, and you don't have a lot of intergenerational interaction often. That's one more thing that I think is marvelous about Quest Club.
But how do you, part of any club is a success is you've got to get younger people and people to join. So first of all, we take away that there's really no interest in sort of liberal arts education. Younger people are not necessarily joining anything. They, let alone want to watch anything that's longer than a 30-second video, let alone have to write, which when we were figuring this out, you're talking is probably about a 30,000 to 40,000 word paper. But and also, they don't know how to do research, and it's all Google. So how do you struggle with that in a club to maintain and yet also to appeal or to bring in new members? Or?
Yeah, well, I would say a couple of things. First of all, we do have, we encourage everyone to bring guests, and so that's a good way to get someone in the door. And I think it is, as you said, in a world that is increasingly polarized and lacking civility. A Quest Club is different from that. Certainly not everyone in that room has the same viewpoint on anything, but we have an understanding that there's a beauty to that, and there's a richness to that is of value. And so I think for some younger people or even newer members coming in, it's both surprising and comforting to know that still exists in the world. And that it's nurtured in Quest Club. And I think that's one of the important things we do. And you'll find when papers are presented, even if it's on a topic that has folks vehement on different sides, you'll find the paper shows you all of those sides without actually staking a flag and saying this is where I personally stand. It's a little bit different.
Well, because it's
mindset.
not an opinion.
Right.
And it is based on fact.
Exactly.
So when we talk about all these fake news and making up facts, it's not, because in any true academic or scholar, it's all based on facts. You have to cite your sources, and you have to cite where you get your information from, and so it's not at all. The way that you shape it in terms of when you're given a broad topic, that is more your sort of how you personalize point of view. But the information or what you're going to find is right.
It just is.
Right. And so, but I just think if this is more of a luxury today. I think I think we need it. I think we need more of it. But I'm just wondering, because part of it also, I think, with the club is that you're looking at things and talking about things that help to make us know about what's going on in the world today, to remain relevant, to remain engaged. And to me, it's just so contrary. It's almost like, I sort of feel like Quest clubs, you're on this island, right?
Right.
And then the sharks are swarming. And so I'm just wondering, like, how that, if that's something that the members are, I mean, maybe that would be an interesting paper for somebody. But
well, yeah, that's a good idea. I would say one of the things, and this is interesting, even when I was first joining years ago, one of the things that people will say, gosh, it sounds like a lot of work. And I think once you come and you see, one of the things you understand is that, and this is what I came to see, is that this is something I do for myself. It's not another commitment. It's not another appointment to go to. That's not what it is. It is a time to gather. It's a time to learn. It's a time to question. And it really is differentiated from other appointments on your calendar and other things, because it really is something you do for yourself.
Right.
To expand. And just, this year's topics, I don't know if you got a chance to take a look at them, but it's everything from Georgia O'Keeffe to Vikings and Templars, to the American political primary. I mean, we had a presentation by one of our younger members who did a fabulous job earlier this year on Maurice Hilleman, the father of modern vaccines. Mm-hmm. So, we try to do a very wide variety of arts, of science. We had a paper 3 or 4 years ago on are the liberal arts dead?
Right.
So we try to be current in some things, but also very broad in what we do, so that we're really nurturing many facets of people.
But I also think what I found was interesting, like you said about his liberal arts dead, there are a lot of topics that have been done in the past or have been discussed that are still, like, you could regenerate them. I mean, sort of like you did America's Civil Rebellion, the tenets of our the founders in 2007. American politics, is it a moral swamp? That was done in 1991. Are the classics relevant? That was 1990. I like this one from 2000. How do we learn and what do we really know?
Yeah.
I mean, so if you so I'm wondering also then, because we're constantly I mean, these are obviously a lot of these topics and things are the topics and things that people have debated and created around discourse from the dawn of time. I mean, but do you think that then, okay, so if you have this exercise to talk about these topics and we're diving deep into them and we're engaging in them, yet we really don't have we haven't made any solutions, nothing's, I mean, in a sense, things are the same, stay the same as much as they change. I mean, does that ever sort of, I mean, it frustrates me as a personal person, but do you think that ever frustrates any, I mean, I'm just curious, like, what I'm more curious with the Quest members, because obviously, one of the things that you talk about is what is a Quester, and so it is someone who's constantly on this search of seeking and discovery. And so I'm just wondering, though, if, especially with members, and you have some members who have been in the club over 50 years.
Correct, we do. Yeah.
So I'm just curious if they are like, we keep talking about the same things, every couple of years, and what's really changed?
Well, I would say this. First of all, when the committee is selecting papers, we do have a list of and so if someone brings something up, we quickly say, well, we did that, so, maybe 10 years ago. Is there something that's happened societally that changes that and that we should revisit it?
Right.
Or has something dramatically different changed in our perception that we should readdress? So we try not to. If anything is revisited, it's revisited from a different perspective or with new information.
Or it's been updated.
Exactly.
I mean, you did one in 2006, stem cell research. Well, now you could change that whole thing because it's modernized, how medical treatments are given beyond.
And we try not to, if you're going to the movies or standard television, everything is a redo of something.
Right.
We try not to do that. We're not, oh, good, Quest has trotted out that paper again. We try to have a very different take on something if we redo it at all. But we find, because one of the ways we get our paper topics is we request them from Questers. So, at every meeting, in the spring, we'll be saying, the committee will be meeting this summer, please give us your list of ideas, and then we group them into categories. Is it about science? Is it about arts? Is it about politics? Is it, is it biography? What is it? And then we try to balance that so that we're doing different types of things and some humor along the way, so that we're not giving, 6 papers in a row that are all political, or 6 papers that are all scientific or mathematic. And
then how do you assign them? Do you put the topics in one hat and the names of the people who are supposed to give a paper, and you just pick them in.
That's what we did this year. We just, rather than, the one thing we will sometimes steer clear of is giving someone something that's already in their wheelhouse, so
Right,
to
of
speak.
course,
It's something like, although my first paper was on Indiana's right to work laws, and I went, okay, I'm a lawyer, so that's not, it was fun. It was fun to do because
Right.
that was not in my area of practice. But we try to give people something that we think will, not necessarily the topic interests them, they may know nothing about it and may never have thought about it, but something that will help them, that they'll enjoy, and that they'll walk away thinking, boy, I'm glad I got that paper. My last paper was on the recently deceased E.O. Wilson, the entomologist and Harvard professor. And I can tell you that doing that paper on E.O. Wilson and reading all of his books was transformative for me.
Okay, so let's talk about, so as an entomologist, so he studies...
he studied ants.
Ants, right.
Right.
And, well, ants are fascinating
Right.
in terms of their
Right.
own world,
Right.
how they create their own society and
Right.
stuff. So let's start from, okay, so when did you give this paper?
4 or 5 years ago.
Okay, so let's start, and you get a year, or how many?
It depends on
Okay,
when,
right,
the
all right.
papers are assigned in early summer, like late
Okay,
June, and
so-
we start in October, so some folks have 5 months, others have nearly a year because we end at the end of April.
Okay, so
right.
so I'm assuming that, you're not necessarily a bug person. I
I'm a
mean,
gardener, but
Okay.
I had never studied
okay,
ants.
so you got this topic, and a lot of people, what I've heard from questers is the first thing they say is, what have I gotten myself into?
Right.
Like, it's like,
Well, I'll tell you that because Wilson actually studied ants, but then also became he's developed theories of eusociality in various species, or 7 or 8 species. So my actual paper topic was E.O. Wilson on the meaning of human existence.
Right.
So it was not a,
because what he really,
Right.
what he was also really able to show in really starting with ants, but then evolving, is how, in a sense, a society is created, and
Right.
how the
markers that
the laws. I mean,
Yeah.
you would say these were natural laws, but how everything is defined and
Right.
created, and the structure, and how, and really, if you think about it, evolution, it makes sense that you
Right.
can then trace that to
Yeah.
how we create
and
societies.
I think one of his precepts, which is interesting in today's context, I think, is that humans in particular, and this is the differentiation of humans from all other eusocial species, really, is that we have both a strong desire to be an individual and a desperate need to be part of a group.
Right.
And that is a tension, but it's an inextricable entwining of 2 very basic needs that we have. So that was a very intriguing paper to write.
And you really see that, you really have seen that since COVID. Absolutely,
absolutely.
those
Yes,
issues. Yeah.
yes.
And so, so also, since you're a gardener, have you has it given you a new respect when you see the ants and other critters in your garden?
Well, ants are great pollinators. So unless unless they would be carpenter ants trying to eat your house.
Right.
And I'm an organic gardener, and so I don't use pesticides. But I did find myself intrigued. I started reading. I read about 6 of his books, and I started with the non-ant based books. But I ultimately did read one. He has just a tome on ants, and I read a good part of that. I didn't finish it.
And if you think about it, like, I mean, not only, if you really think about how this type of research or things is used, think about the creation of, like, the movie A Bug's Life. I mean, they go back and they read all of the academic work and stuff to understand, and then you sort of contemporize it and make it more relevant. And I'm just, so again, I mean, I'm going back to, how in today's society, I mean, we all are so technologically driven, and we are so visual. And although podcasts, this is the return of the royal age of audio, but there is a very big difference between being engaged in an audio program and even listening to a lecture versus having someone read a paper.
Right.
I mean, and having someone stand up and read, for 30 minutes is tough. I mean, even now, books on tape, I mean, how they get the right voices and they get different people. And so I'm just curious, though, I understand that there is the value of the tradition and what the club was set on, but I'm just curious how that conflict of recognizing, is it realistic that people want to...
Well, I will say one thing that we've done, as I said, kind of as an evolutionary change of the organization, is that, I mean, when I first joined, you were strongly discouraged from using anything other than a straightforward reading of the paper. And now we do have audio. I mean, we have people who will, and we, for example, on the paper on Georgia O'Keeffe, we had a beautiful slideshow showing her art throughout her career and how it changed when she moved to New Mexico, and and just so that really added value to the presentation of the paper to have that visual component.
Right.
We've had papers on jazz and different things where an audio component really is helpful.
That would expand.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think I don't necessarily think that the founders of Quest or any society, group or anything, I think they created it and established it within the capabilities and the technologies or facility they had at the time. Yeah. So I think that, I don't think that if they had, slideshows and video, and I don't think that they would be opposed, because I think the whole point of this is to engage, right? And to get people to question. I mean, there is somebody said that part of why the luncheons and, without all the technology is because it's an outlet for exchanging ideas and exploring them thoughtfully without noise, from the outside kind of all that we're being influenced from. So it does give you that sense of a pause to sort of take some time and,
I would agree with that. I will say that, we do still strongly discourage just having bullet points on a PowerPoint.
Right.
I mean, that's not really,
I can't stand PowerPoints in anything.
Right. So, but for example, we have had a number of Questers come costumed, for their, I can recall, one woman who gave a paper on Mae West and came dressed. We've had someone dressed for, all sorts of, it should really to sort of get us into the spirit of what they're going to be talking about. So I do think that one of the things that helps with these papers is the individual creativity of the people presenting them, because you can have slides, you can have audio, you can have costuming, you can have affectations and voices that you really we have no limit on those sorts of things, and we find that people have great fun sometimes. Once they really get into the paper, they have great fun with it, and that makes for a fabulous presentation and really makes it rewarding for people who are there listening to it.
And do you ever think that, I know that you don't repeat topics or papers, but like some things that come back around or that are topical, because someone did a Stephen Sondheim, An American Genius in 2001, and so you're sort of thinking, if we could, maybe we could represent that, or somebody could take that and then look at it as because now that you're looking at that he passed away, it's a very different type of look at it, but you use the basis. Or there was a person actually, when I went to one of the Quest meetings, and I did an exhibit here about happiness and how you define it, and about how it's said in the DNA with the Declaration of Independence and everything. And this person wrote a paper about happiness and how it was defined, and of course I got it after, but I was like, wow, I wish I would have had that. And so I just also wonder if you wish, because of the amount of time and effort and work that are put into these papers, that they would have a bigger, people would be greater aware of them in the community, or even maybe offer some of these lectures where you can invite, like do it at the library, whether you invite the community, or having the community know. I mean, do you ever think about, from the standpoint as the president, that here all these people did all this work, and so it's sort of, we're preaching to the choir in a sense, because members, obviously, but I sort of feel like those aren't the people we need to be reaching to know how to do this and why they should do it. It's,
I'll put my Board Brilliant hat back on and say that's something that has to be addressed at the mission level of the organization. The mission right now, as it has always stood, is that we research papers for our own personal edification and growth, and for those fellow Questers. And so I think that would be a discussion that would have to happen.
So that would be like then changing the whole mission of it. So really right now it's really, I think that's
it's
really...
if you think of a book club, it's similarly focused, not how it operates, but that it is for those of us who have that commonality of the interest of staying curious and of questing for knowledge, to come together as a group to sort of find one another.
So do you think, like I said, it's like that island of like minds? I mean, do you think that part of it is because it gives you that place, like sort of like that oasis from what we're seeing in, the rest of society? From someone who's been involved in Quest and now the president, are you concerned about how the lack of discourse and polarization, and how people don't think critically and can't have conversations? Are you
I think that's societally. I think that's a concern. Personally, I can say that. I would say absolutely. I think I think even in my profession as an attorney, there was a diminishment in civility over time. I think that's societal. I think anybody can see that, and I'm not sure what the cause or if there's any singular cause for that. But I will say that Quest Club is a respite from that, and I think that's one of the reasons that when people come, and we do have younger members, and they're joining, and has been a wonderful thing for us, and our numbers have held quite steady. We're actually, we've got younger people on our membership committee now, which is a great thing, and are looking at new opportunities on how to reach out to even more people.
But you don't, it's not like you go out and solicit. It's not like you have a membership drive. It's sort of like people say, oh, you should come, or they think someone they've met would be interested.
Right, or someone who knows someone. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone that I know, but if I have a friend who may themselves not have the time for Quest or not be involved, but they say, oh gosh, that sounds like something that Beth would enjoy doing, well then I'll meet with Beth and invite her. One of the things that we do strive to do with membership, though, is to make sure that before someone actually joins, they understand the full commitment, that you do have to write these papers every so often, and you don't pick the topics. And it turns out to be, once you do it, you think, that was amazing.
Right.
I never would have picked up one of E.O. Wilson's books without my Quest paper.
Right.
And yet, for me, it was a wonderful thing. And I'm looking forward next year when I'm done being chair, I get to do a paper again, and I'm looking forward to it, because the other thing, too, is if you're someone who I had spent 30 years writing, but writing legal briefs.
Right.
And so to step back and then to be able to take a paper that I can craft, and it doesn't have to have legal citations and whereases and, and here and befores and all those things in it, that for me turned out to be something that I found quite enjoyable. It had been a long time since I had stepped away from the Harvard Citator Blue Book and gone to Strunk and White, and it was a nice.
Although there is a lot of the academic citations that you have to include.
Yeah.
Although it's funny that you talk about how you write, because I do a lot of journalistic writing, which is sources, and you don't cite your sources because you quote your sources. They're more But I'm part of a fellowship, and so I have to do this more academic, and you have to cite your sources. And I'm like, oh my, I don't remember the last time I had to write footnotes. But now it's so easy. You go to citations.com and they just help you put it all in. And it's amazing. But I think that it is a different form of writing.
It is.
And that exercise. See, like to me, writing a paper on a topic on something, that's what you do every day as a journalist. So that's not the daunting.
And you do with law too, because you're researching you're presenting a theory, but it's just how you do it, and the freedom that you have in Quest to go down a pathway just because it intrigues you, rather than you're trying to persuade a judge or a jury to, so there's a differentiation between this type of paper and often what people do in their careers. And I think most people in Quest find it refreshing. I think I've not run into anyone who said to me, boy, I really wish I hadn't had to do that paper, because we try to be picking interesting topics so that whoever receives it, even if it's not something they would have considered on their own, it's sort of like we were invited to a wedding in Europe in a city we never would have gone to, and found it to be spectacular. Quest is like that. It's the paper version of that you find something and think, this is just remarkable. I thank, you always start by thanking the committee for the topic, and it's almost always heartfelt, because it's a new thing that you have opened your mind to, that you, without Quest, probably would have not bumped into in this life.
And these are not people who would do, stay up all night and write a paper. These are not, because they really do, like you said, you read all the books from Wilson. They really do spend the time to do the research, to get the background, to speak to people.
It's an immersion. You immerse yourself in.
So let's talk about what was another topic that you had to do?
Well, the right to work in Indiana. And that actually, even though it was legal, it turned out to be very intriguing. And for anybody who's watching this, Indiana, some states are right to work, which means that you don't have to join a union, and you can.
And they also can just fire you.
That's at will employment, that is intertwined though. And Indiana is also an at will, which means that as long as they're not doing something overtly discriminatory under federal discrimination laws, you can be fired. But so Indiana was this was the right to work law in Indiana, and unbeknownst, I think, to the folks who assigned me the topic, the case was being litigated. There was a case being litigated based on some statutes that had been enacted, and literally the last change to the law occurred about 2 days before my paper. So I had gone through it, but I had to edit significantly at the end, because so sometimes you get a topic that is fast moving and is not static, and so you're having to adapt it at the very last minute.
But even if and how long ago did you do that paper?
That was about 9 years ago.
Okay, so let's say 10 years. So even if you look at the relevance today, because first of all, there was the issue that they didn't pass the additional work accommodations for like pregnant women and those accommodations. And then also, what you also have, I've learned is that Indiana is also really a state that, in terms of work, that is very pro-employer.
Pro-business.
So you learn all these, so it's still, you know, if you look at, and I also think one of the interesting things that I think, again, looking at new generation, is that they don't understand the importance of history and how things build upon them, and understanding where things came from or why things are done the way they are. And so I think that a lot of times, like a perfect example is the Indiana right to work, is really understanding where that came from and how it came in. And so I'm just curious because on this topic, so now, you know, we went through a time where there were very strong unions. And then there was a time where we had busting of the unions. And now what you see is a lot of organizations, like the employees are creating unions, like even some Starbucks employees. Or you're really seeing it a lot in newsrooms now. And when I was at the Chicago Sun-Times, I was in a union. Because it was, you know, it was still in the union paper. But the interesting thing is we were in a union also with all of the pressmen and the delivery. It was like one big union. But so I'm curious is just thinking about it, and you're looking at that, is now we're going back to that people feel that they do want, because of the fact that either they're just laid off, or they look at when all of these VCs come in and just take everything, and, you know. And so I'm just, you know, it's also things that are cyclical.
Right.
So
yeah, I would agree, and that's one that you're right. I mean, in the phase where there was an argument by many workers pro right to work, that I don't want to have to, it was largely the genesis of it was, I don't like paying dues. I don't want money taken out of my paycheck to support a union. And then I think once those were removed, then, you know, processes changed, and so now they're looking at them again.
Right.
So,
and for me, no, absolutely. When I got hired at the Chicago Sun-Times, it was like, if you want this job, you will join the union.
Right.
And you will pay the dues, and whatever you feel about a union, but
Yeah. And so I think there have been discussions, I think, pro and con, about what the services are that they provide versus the cost that it entails, and that's been the discussion.
Or also looking at really what, maybe that's, again, we could come up with some good quest papers here, but maybe it's the evolution of what is the role of a union, because what I think they want is more the collective bargaining, or the impact that, like, if you have everybody stop working, or you know, everybody who says, well, we need to be heard, you know, from the standpoint of Starbucks, you know, to the management. So you know, maybe it's that shifting, but it's interesting how it, you know, evolves.
And that would be an interesting paper, really, not only the trajectory of the desire for unions among workers, but also, as you said, the transition, our unions undergoing transitions to be more attractive to workers in the 21st century, because generationally there are going to be differences, certainly industry-wide. We have industries now that didn't exist when unions were in their heydays.
And the majority of people who don't work, they don't want to work. They're gig, or
gig workers are an entire,
right. And so, and then you see also what's happened, like in the state of California, where they really are anti-gig. So like for freelancers, if you write more than 3 articles, you have to be an employee. So they've killed all of the freelance writing and in the state of California, because that's how most media entities, and so it's even that, like, okay, so now you're making it difficult
to be a gig worker.
Yeah. So it's, you know, I think so. I think it's partly, and truthfully, I would say that in truth, this program is probably just a video version of Quest, because what I try to do is have these conversations and talk to people and find out different things, and I don't know where they're going to go and where it leads, and, you know, I think, you know, obviously, so I think that I think it would be interesting sort of to go back and look at some of the topics and say, okay, let's run that through now a lens of the 21st century and do a comparison. Like, how has it changed? So then at least you would give some of the questers a jump start because they'd have the past, already done. Or it would be great if in some cases, if the person who did the original paper could be assigned to do that. Because I do think that some of it is, because history and context is so important, that it would be interesting to sort of take that and now, because we have to put everything through the new filter.
Sure.
Because everything, I don't really think there's any aspect of society that hasn't been impacted by technology.
Right.
I don't think, if you look at, we now have, this is the second largest generation ever.
Right.
So what does that mean? I think you have to relook at everything. Even, like I said, the value of education, higher education. When I went to college, it was you were going to college to become a well-educated, knowledgeable person. Right. It wasn't about a job.
A specific task.
Right. And so now it's really about vocation.
Right.
So I think that would be interesting. And now, and then, so tell me, so the topics of the papers, you have a committee, but so people just submit topics?
Yes. Anyone in Quest Club can, and we get hundreds every year. People are good about submitting topics. And then the committee, usually the incoming president is the person who chairs that committee. And so we'll go through along with our executive director, who is a member, and we'll synthesize that and have a large list, see if there are any duplicates. Then we do go back and make sure, is there something that's repetitive that maybe has been done in the last 5 to 10 years, and even further back? And if so, is this something that needs to be revisited? Has there been something transformational, that we need to actually revisit it and do it in the context of saying we're revisiting, this is a redo or a revisit? And then trying to make sure we have balance among different, whether I said arts and science and biographies and humor and all those different areas. And then doing our pulling the hat, we have a list. We're on a constant rotation so that, once you give your paper, you go to the end of the line and you work your way up. So it's
like every 2 years or 2.5 years, I think.
About 2.5 to 3, I think,
right, yeah.
So then we pair names with topics and then send out that information to each person, and the president
and
does
the first
that.
thing they say is, what have I gotten myself into?
Right.
So what are some of the topics or papers that, because you're just in the midst of this season.
Right.
So what are some of the papers and topics that have been given this season, or ones that you have found that really resonated you, surprised you, or you're looking forward to?
Well, this year we've had a number of fabulous papers. The one I mentioned, the vaccine paper, the father of modern vaccines, Maurice Hilleman, who it was a phenomenal person and just transformative globally, and very interesting in the area that we're in with COVID vaccines. George O'Keefe was this year. We had one that was just fabulous on the politics of Myanmar. We had one that just right before the holiday break that was on the history of U.S.-French relations. And it was interesting. The person put a great, it was very entertaining. You can imagine saying that all in the same sentence, that it was that.
Well, don't you remember, it was in the early 2000s that there was the whole joke, like there was some friction with trade, so that nobody was we couldn't have we couldn't call them French fries, and then we weren't going to get the French wines and stuff. So
we revisited that freedom fries, and then in the way that questers do, the person who gave that paper then took us on a path of how did they ever become French fries, called French fries in the first place. So you had these little avenues that you went down that were intriguing and funny and somewhat. So that was a wonderful paper. Today's paper, we have a meeting today, is on the gold standard.
Which we don't have anymore. Which in the debate is, should we go back to it? But although now I think we're too far down that path.
Right, although it's broad enough that this person can really interpret that phrase to mean what they want. It doesn't necessarily have to be, we'll see.
Well, because it could be, because there is the economic meaning of what it literally,
but this is the gold standard in medicine. This is
it's the interpretation of,
exactly. So this person is free. I don't know, I'll find out.
So all you do is you would say to someone, your topic is, what is the gold standard?
Yeah.
And then that's it.
Yeah. It's actually not even what, it's just the gold standard. So you can determine how you'd like to do that. Next week's paper is on the effect of the Ice Age on Indiana.
Well, that's a big thing because of all the metafrost and the melting. And so, but is there someone like, okay, so let's say you get a topic and you're sort of like, okay, like the gold standard, that's it. Like, can you seek out, like, can you sort of have someone you could talk to? Or?
Yes, you're always, it's always acceptable to ask me, the president who's chaired the committee, can I ask who submitted this topic? And then I can talk with them. Yes, absolutely.
Right.
That's always.
Right.
The other thing is, right here in the Allen County Public Library, John Beatty, who is, a community historian and just, one of.
He's up in the.
He's in genealogy.
Yes, he is more. He is the guy for.
He is for everything.
In his genes is research and knowledge.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so many people will reach out to John and get some guidance, or even for here. What's here that I can look at to get me started on this topic? And John is so gracious. He is always willing to help Quest folks get started down their path. So we do have the opportunity, clarification, as talking to the person who submitted the topic, talking to John. There's So it's not it does not have to be a solitary experience at all. It can be if you'd like.
But by nature it is, and that's the nature of. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, that is the nature of accumulating knowledge, because you have to sit, you have to read, you have to think about it, you have to, So, are you hopeful for? I mean, because when you look, we sort of presented some of the issues of the next generation, and even in your day-to-day life, I'm sure when you're someone like this that really values knowledge and education and research and facts, and you see how people just, getting it from their Facebook, or they don't really care. That does cause concern on a personal level. But are you hopeful for this type of club to? Now Quest Club is unique to form. It's not like there's one of these in every city.
This was there may be something similar somewhere, but Quest Club was.
It's not
its
like
Genesis was Fort Wayne, and it was not a replication of anything from anywhere else.
So are you hopeful? Do you think that that it will be here for its 200?
I am, and I'll say that you start off, you say yes, we're a subset of, but I think that's always been true, and I don't think that if you hearken back 50 or even 110 years, that you would have found a community anywhere that the vast majority of people would have been interested in something like Quest.
It's like Ben Franklin had his salons.
Right.
But I think ultimately what's interesting is for people to understand that there are these subsets in Fort Wayne.
Yeah.
And that people don't realize there are lots of these types of clubs, and that that people aren't exposed to even know that, not that they may be interested in or not, but that they're out there.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, to me, it's sort of like before Facebook was Facebook. This is what people did.
Yes.
People got together and talked about, or had a commonality or an interest, like you said, book clubs. But I think people would be really surprised that here is this club that does no other purpose than for its members to continue to indulge their own curiosity and desire for knowledge with other like-minded individuals who are broad-minded in a sense.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting for people in Fort Wayne to realize that.
Yeah, and thank you for letting me come on and chat about it.
I think it's fascinating, and I think people are, and I think, it's not necessarily, it may not be for them, but the fact that people to realize that there are these things here, and they're happening, and and maybe, and then ultimately, like for instance, I think they do sometimes have reverberations into the community, because when Connie Zass-Huber did a paper on, she gave a Mather lecture based on a paper she did about alleys.
Yes.
And then I thought it was really fascinating, so I interviewed her for a story when I was in the mainstream press, and then I wanted her to continue to do that, and I thought she could really do a book. And now, if you think about what we've done now in Fort Wayne with our alleys, and activated them with art, and made them places even where people can sit, and so it is a constant. And so I think that, and just like you said, some of the topics, they do really have opportunity in the greater community.
And I would say, I think, there's a parallel between something like Quest and the arts, and that is that not everyone, and I've been on a number of the arts boards in the community, not everyone is going to attend the Philharmonic or the Art Museum or the ballet, but they are the essence of our community, to have that tapestry, that richness. And Quest Club is something like that as well. I think if you are in the community and you're interested in it, you can Google us, and there is a website, but it is something that adds to the richness of the community, I think.
And I think it's interesting for people in the community to know that there are these guys, and even though it may not be for you, it does. All of these things make a rich fabric and make our sort of, if you think about the knots in our rug, stronger.
Yes,
and that,
absolutely.
but we're all on, it's the rug is ultimately the mosaic of it.
Right.
So, yeah. Well, at the end of each And Good Company program, I ask guests the same 12 questions that French novelist Marcel Proust popularized from a Victorian parlor game. What is your favorite word?
Animal.
What is your least favorite word?
Hate.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
That takes me a minute to think
Okay.
about. What turns me on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally? I would say working with animals. Yeah.
What turns you off creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Closed-mindedness.
What sound or noise do you love?
Jazz.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Fingers on a chalkboard.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I think a canine behaviorist.
What profession would you not like to do?
Anything that involves math.
What do you consider your greatest achievement?
Professionally, or even volunteer-wise, I would say professionally it was representing people who needed help and being able to do that. From a volunteer standpoint and a humane standpoint, serving as the chair of the board of the Allen County SPCA, merging us with Hope for Animals so that we could have one large organization.
And that's become humane.
Humane Fort Wayne. Mm-hmm.
Who, living or dead, would you most like to have a conversation with?
I think E.O. Wilson, actually. I never got to. I would have loved to have done that.
How would you like to die?
In my garden, quickly.
And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Here are all your dogs.
Well, I want to thank Cathy Roudebush of Board Brilliant and the president of the Quest Club, and now we have found out very involved with Humane Fort Wayne, for having a seat at our table. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, Sarah. This was wonderful.
And you can learn more about And Good Company and all the other great conversations we have had at andgoodcompany.info. And we look forward to next week when you can again enjoy a seat at the table for great conversation and good company.